November 18th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Yountville Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission to order. May we start with a roll call, please?
Commissioners Bremer,
Present.
David,
Present.
Ruig,
Present.
Vice Chair Courtney,
Here.
and Chair Tencher.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'd like to have a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, we have it moved in second. Do we just do a voice vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, not seeing any. That passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes as published? Seeing none, I'd like a motion to approve the minutes from our July 17th, 2025 meeting.
So moved.
Okay, we have
Second.
moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? None. That passes. Okay, public comment on items not listed on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is administrative regular items. A, presentation and update on Yountville Commons.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners. I am Brad Ralston, your town manager. I have Brendan Kelly, our lead designer, his wife Kelly Morgan, who have been working with us for about a year, a little over. We acquired the school site a year and a half ago, and obviously this is a informational item. We're not asking you to make any decisions. Are you going to pull up the PowerPoint? I just hope so I don't see it in front of me. It's everywhere else. Yeah, it's okay. I got to figure out if I'm wearing glasses or not. So I actually should have said from the start, and I know you know this, but since we've had a full week plus now of outreach, this is the schedule that we've been working through, and this is your regular meeting. And I know that you have a pretty meaty item next, so I am going to go much quicker through this. I know a number of you have paid attention either at the study session last Tuesday or the ZDRB the previous Tuesday. There was open houses. Brendan hosted one-on-ones. We did focus groups. There's been a lot of conversation in the past week, which has been really great. Since this is your regular meeting, we'll take the typical format where we'll provide a presentation, ask any clarifying questions. You can then take public comment, and then any final comments and direction is the format we try to follow. So that's what we will do. I will do most of the talking today, but clearly Brendan and I are here to answer questions. I think, blank screen. Oh, I won't re-show the videos. We showed 2 videos that were basically when we bought it and then when we adopted what are the conceptual drawings here. 6 months ago, roughly. They've since evolved, and in the model, which is before you, and there's site plan and handouts and lots of other information, is really the most illustrative. And what we did, which was really, I'll give Carrie all the credit, was we updated the model such that you can see the white buildings are the new buildings and the gray buildings are the old buildings or the existing buildings, including the contextual buildings. And I think there was a little more detail provided for like the Hopper Creek condos and buildings around it, so you can kind of see it in its setting. So the white buildings we will talk about. For the purpose of today is to get input related to parks and recreation, since this is the charge of this group. So we actually added a few slides at the very end, and we can show you some new visuals as it relates to the swimming pool, which became an important discussion point, and I think an important thing for you all to weigh in on today in terms of the options. And so we'll end there, just so you know. And I do think, of course, Samantha is here in terms of what we're currently doing with our programming is predominantly in Schmidt Hall, which is the old auditorium building, which is the gray building closest to me on the model. We've had camps in there, other sort of programming that it's been really put to good use in the last year and a half by Parks and Rec. So clearly that's important. And then, the parks, you see the main green space, which we, I will quickly explain the train metaphor too. But there was a whole thing on the train metaphor. And there is actually I think it's like a 12-minute video on the process. So green, yellow, blue, let's just talk about that. Green is where we've been, yellow is where we are in the planning phase, blue is building. We're going through what we call RFQ crossing, which is basically us working with a design build policy. And what that means is that we are going through an RFQ to shortlist potential design build entities. And we had gotten 8 qualified submittals from design build entities. Next week, we will be interviewing all 8. Chair Tencher will be part of that, as will Chair Miller and Chair Bertolucci. Our team, including Brendan, myself, John Ferns, who's here, and then Sean Grinnell. Our goal is to shortlist that to 3 or 4. And then we know, who the builders are. And if you go down the path a little further, past funding junction, you see RFP grade. And so that's in essence, once we have discussed funding with the council and we've gotten direction about all of the details and how it's paid for, we then talk about an RFP, which is basically going to those shortlisted design build firms and asking for proposals specific to whatever the council has agreed to fund. So that's really important, because that's really kind of the critical juncture when all of the ideas become real. And clearly, there's a lot here, and I don't want to even, try to get too deep into the how you're going to pay for it conversation. And I think the operator onboarding, which is at the top there, is another big part of the conversation, which I'm happy to talk about today. But all of these things sort of need to happen in order for us to get to a point where we can make an informed, intelligent decision as a community on what we will build. So we'll have more information next week on that. The video link goes there, but we're not going to show the video link. The site plan is where I want to start here. So when the council adopted the conceptual drawings in March of this year, you see the basically site plan on the left. Now you have the site plan on the right. They're very similar. So I think the point of this slide is to show that. Is there a blow-up of the site plan next? No. This is so if you look at the slide on the right, and the left, you see the green space, which is sort of the main park area, which is, we call it the oval, the meadow, and the dog park. But there's also green spaces all around, and I would encourage you all to sort of look at the model and see how even Hopper Creek becomes what I would call a linear park, where there's more spaces along the creek to, to have a picnic or to have sort of passive spaces. And I think that's really an important part of the whole design as it relates to parks and open space, is how the creek becomes a much more sort of usable space, even though there's buildings there. Brendan can talk more about that. I also think that what you see starting to take shape in what we call the Midtown Connector is basically the connection between the Vine Trail and the Hopper Creek Trail. So you can enter the town on Weber, up there along the top. As you know, on the the west side of the French Laundry Garden. We just finished paving. There will be a advisory lane, which basically is the stamped asphalt where you see the brick look that is our crosswalks and such. So that will actually take you from the Vine Trail all the way to the site. You can drive on it, but you can walk and bike. It's more of a visual connection that is important. And then as you make your way through the site, you connect to the Hopper Creek Trail. And not only is it the setbacks of the buildings and kind of the park, but because we need to create a fire lane back there, it will be an expanded multimodal trail is the term, but a sidewalk which will allow for bikes. So there will be a separation between the bikes and the pedestrians, and it'll be much wider. And it really creates a nice connection if you're going to go from the Vine Trail through the site to Fennell and out to Crossroad. This is how a lot of people kind of meander through town. So it's going to be a very, I think, important sort of recreational component to the site, which is already starting because of the pavement work we've been doing on Washington. You also probably saw that it's going to be a four-way stop there at Washington and Weber, which provides bike safety and pedestrian safety as well. The Civic Arcade, which is along Yount, which is I guess we've renamed the guest house the Common House or the Commons House, and that was just basically to explain what it was intended. But there is a setback there, which is also, arguably a linear park, different because it's along a street, but I do see that as a really important civic space that can be used as well, whether it's, used as outdoor eating or we're talking about different uses on the ground floor, but I think that's important. And then the front of Town Hall changes, which I think is another, you can see we've sort of taken the parking away from the north side of it because I think that Humboldt connection, we talked about Weber as the Midtown connector, but Humboldt, as you make your way through the site, when the building behind me gets demolished, really becomes this important gateway into the site, and that by taking away the parking, right here, it just becomes a much more inviting way to, enter a civic space. And
see the speed table on the model too.
Oh yeah, there'll be a speed table. We're going to really sort of emphasize those Weber and Humboldt connections. And the other sort of unfound public space will be the space between the Commons House and Yountville Fitch Schmidt Hall. That's a big sort of area that really opens up. And again, people are going to the gym. It becomes a very sort of, to me, public area that, complements the uses around it. So point is, there's a lot of sort of park and open space components, and we can talk about all that as you desire. I'm going to skip that slide. There's pictures of the model. This gets into all the different perspectives. These buildings, the guest house is on the bottom, the Commons House is on the bottom. This is where architecture, people like to see how buildings are going to look. That first building, you can see adjacent to Town Hall, is intended to complement that. The building in the back or along the top is the Village Center. So Creekside Village, which is where most of the housing is, it needs a core and it also needs amenities. The idea is on the ground floor, it would be basically a really playful laundry room because you do need laundry, but also areas where you can watch the game, kind of what we've done with the Locals Lounge, but making it bigger and more accessible. And I think that the rooftop garden is on the top. That's why I look at Vincent, because I remember when we were here and he said the last thing when we got comments from PRAC last time was, he goes, don't forget rooftop gardens. And so when we were talking about it, it wasn't because of you, Vincent, even though I did think of you. I do think like this building is really, or these two buildings are the only buildings with elevators, which is an important thing from a cost perspective. But because they're more public buildings, like I think that rooftop and the ability for the public to have a space, because it'll be a dramatic space with the views and being able to connect. I think it's an important component, and I was really pleased when Brendan did this sketch, because I think lavage is sort of this play on words. It's French for laundry, but it's basically just kind of this idea of a village center for the whole project, but specifically the back village. All kinds of really beautiful imagery in terms of how the landscape and how the runnels, which is how the water sort of moves through the site, trellises for pedestrian paths. Just you can see the attention to detail that is being intended for these. And this, I'll go back to the oval as kind of being the central piece. There's a slight grade change, so we'll have to have a stair. So we're looking at how that stair can really kind of shape a public area. And then you have the meadow, which is really the flat grass area, if you will. So I think this can accommodate, lots of different things that Sam would be able to talk about in terms of programming. And then the dog park, which is, what we have, but this will be next level dog park. It'll also be on the other corner of the site, so a more accessible site. And I think people seem to be excited about the dog park. There's plant palettes. We can talk about that. There's different permeable pavers. I think what's so important about this site is, what I'll just use like the diversity of materials. Like you don't want just like one thing, right? Then it looks very civic. This will be, I think, a good combination of different things that when you see yellow on this site, what you're seeing is really permeable pavers like throughout, which will integrate landscape and runnels and all kinds of interesting components. Again, seating, kind of all these creative ideas. The parking groves, as they're being called, are both also permeable. We can talk about parking, but I do think this is, the balancing act of making sure that it's got of course housing and buildings and civic uses and parking. So I think this has really been thought out. But I think the parking groves means trees and permeable and really sort of these more attractive parking lots. Again, imagery. This was shown as sort of kind of an idea of how you can do density in a thoughtful and creative manner. We talked about middle housing in terms of how do you build something that's not too big, not too small. And then we got into floor plans, which is kind of how these units or these buildings all kind of fit together. And so lots of imagery. So here, the site plan overall, and you will see behind Schmidt Hall, I know I can't point with this, or can I? Can I point with this? Yeah, it won't let me. Is the proposed swimming pool. We kind of went back and forth. It's an interesting discussion because there's certain people that really want it and certain people that really don't want it. There's a real sort of diversity of opinion, I will say, on this subject, which to me is good. And I think we put it in there because, okay, let's have the conversation. But because of the conversation on Tuesday, and I think some people saying, well, what would we do if we didn't have it? So we created some new images for you so that we can talk about this. I'm freezing here. Okay, themes. This is all program stuff and parking stuff. I'm going to come back to this slide because I want to just finish. So here's a perspective that you can see, kind of looking at it from, let's call it above Yountville Fit, looking back at the proposed pool. You can see on the left, we're showing expanded bathrooms, and this would be, showers and locker room facilities. The bare minimum, at least in my perspective, would be for us to improve the bathrooms so that there's clearly bathrooms for Yountville Fit and bathrooms for Schmidt Hall. I think this needs to happen regardless of what we decide on the pool. Okay, we can then get into like iterations of what that should be, but I think that to me is a bare minimum. But if we were to not build a pool, Brendan quickly put together kind of a sketch of what a hard surface, which could include play courts. This is what's shown, basketball, and you got Foursquare over there. Is that what's going on? Foursquare.
I was a king of
So just as a visual, this is not like, oh, we want you to program it this way. But I think these would be public courts, and I think back to the pool, and this is them sort of side by side. there's really sort of three alternatives to how the pool could be operated, okay? And those are simply private, public, and semi-private, okay? So private would mean the pool is only for the residents of the commons. Like it's just like an amenity in an apartment complex that, public would mean it's a municipal pool, I'd have to have Sam, run the numbers and figure out what it's going to cost, and this would be, there still would be a fee for service, but it would be, what you see in other municipal pools. And that's a conversation we can have. It's a different type of pool. And then the in-between, the semi-public or semi-private, and people have been saying the hybrid, is that Yountville Fit, our partner in Yountville Fit, would operate the pool. And then this would mean it would be a membership-based, there would be programming, whether it pays for itself or not. I have talked to Donovan, who's the principal there. This is a question we can't answer yet because there's a lot to be figured out before we decide what the subsidy level, or if the subsidy would be required for the town. I do think in any case the town would have to, or I should say the commons, but through the town would have to build the pool. So there's a cost to building the pool. But I think those three sort of general models, and there's iterations of them, especially the hybrid model, we'd have to determine what the ongoing costs might be and then have the council ultimately, make that decision before we build it. And then we would, do our best to make sure that all the numbers fall in line. But it's generally easy to figure out what it costs to build a pool, but running a pool based on experience, is a moving target, and it's a very hard thing to predict sometimes. So with that, I'll go back just to the slide you have seen before, which is this slide, which really is all of the amenities that are park and rec amenities that are in the different park or facility locations you see, along the top. So you have, I know it's hard to see, but I know you've seen this slide before. Yountville Community Park, Veterans Memorial Park, all the way through, and then down that's easier, thank you. You can see all the parks, and then the final column is the Yountville Commons. And then you can see on the left kind of the amenities. So with the Commons, we just basically showed you, okay, here are the things we are drawing into the plant, and this is where we need you and in the community, ultimately with the council, to help guide the project. And if you have any questions about this, I know it's in your packet, and I think we wanted to add this slide just for purposes of you discussing, because clearly the Commons is in the center of town. It's a core site. It's an important site, but we are rich with amenities, throughout the town. So I think as a town and as a commission, you got to think about things within the context of what we have, and then obviously what we need and what we can afford and so forth. So I'm sure you want to say something, but I know you do. Go for it, and then we'll take any clarifying questions, and as I said, public comment, and then back to sort of any final comments you have. Thanks.
It's a very short comment about this graph.
I think you're off. There you go.
Thank you. A very short comment about this graph. We wanted to see, especially considering how impressive the community center and what a valuable investment it is for the town, to make sure that we were not doubling up things, because we're not residents. We did this a long time ago to make sure that we weren't drawing things that, like the barbecue, which is a great thing, but there's no outdoor, public barbecue and things like that. So we were very conscious about not doubling up on things that were, a block away. And the orange, just for memory, are things that are at the veterans home that are not accessible to the residents, like bocce ball and the pool and the theater are amenities, but they're here, but they're not available. And the dark green are the things that are only available at a specific park. And like the rooftop garden, there's no other rooftop garden, a publicly accessible rooftop garden. That was less than 1 minute.
Okay.
All right. Well, if it suits the council, what I'd like to do before we get into the pool is if there are other park-related or Parks and Rec-related questions relative to what's been presented about the Commons, maybe we could discuss those, because I don't think they'll be potentially as focused as the pool. So does anyone have any particular questions? Lorene?
I do. The dog spot, what is that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The idea of those two buildings that are over kind of where the farm stand is now is that the one closest to the farm stand, I think we call it the local food hub, would generally support what we're already doing over there. There's a lot of need for back of the house storage, and we probably should have a bathroom, different things. The dog spot was an idea of, dog amenities, which is a conversation that we have not had with an operator, but this gets into daycare, sort of overnight, grooming, dog swag, I guess is the right term. I don't know. I'm not a dog owner, but I did go to Carmel recently. They do have 3 shops where you can buy dog, I don't know. It's not supplies. It's not like Petco. It's like, oh, my phone is now telling me it didn't get it. So the idea is like, okay, if the ground floor, okay, in many cases, when you see a building, the idea is we talked about unmet local needs. This was a term that was used, and we got into kind of this discussion of civic versus commercial. And, that's more commercial. But is there a unmet need for that? And I think this is an interesting discussion. So we haven't designed it to the T, because the good thing, I'll get in. You want me to do the form-based thing?
Sure.
Yeah, so the buildings you see here are all form-based, meaning, and particularly these L buildings, which, do you have the big L? Anyway, the buildings there's actually 12 buildings here that have the same exact floor plan. And what that means is that they are designed in a way, when it says form-based, is like the form is the same, but the uses could change. So truthfully, if there wasn't demand, or the council and community said, you know what, the dog spot's a bad idea, that could be housing. It could be more housing. It could be, it could be more local food. So it's not like, if real estate, it's not a build to suit. And I think this is where that decision gives us flexibility down the road. And I think I said in the session, not to go back to the pool, but I said, the reason we need to get input now about the pool is it's not form-based. It serves one function, as a swimming pool. So does that help? Okay.
I have another question. So commerce, we had talked about commerce on the ground level, correct?
Mixed use, that's
Mixed
right.
use. And so I maybe I've missed the boat here, and I apologize for not attending the session since I was out of town. But where would that be? Would that be in this Guest House Civic Arcade? Would that be at the ground floor of also on that roof garden building?
Well, the civic sort of commercial or unmet local needs were the guest house building on the ground floor, and then the 2 buildings I just referred to. And then I think the Lavage building, or the Village Center building, is more of resident serving, But I think if we did build a really nice laundry room, the public could come there and, use it. So I think that is mixed use, but in varying degrees. Every other building that you see here is residential.
The whole term of mixed use is that it could be something, it's residential above, and then a lot of different sort of uses, including residential below.
Here's the big L.
And sorry, I have one more question. Sorry. So the central oval, do we envision that to be like Veterans Park, kind of a stair step with performing arts down below in the center? Is that what can we kind of envision?
Yeah, we thought about that. I think it's different in that the the stairs are kind of behind this pathway. If you can show the whoever who's being able, are you drawing on that? Oh, you're doing. There's a fire lane that goes through there that needs to be maintained in terms of clearance and what have you. So it's not its primary intent, but we did think about how that oval could be an area for programming and performances and things like that.
It's not an amphitheater. Somebody called it an amphitheater yesterday, or maybe Tuesday. I'm not sure who did. It doesn't really matter. But it looks like a classical sort of, thing with stairs. The stairs are about 2 feet tall, in terms of it's a very gentle rise. So there's not like a bank of stairs where someone's watching, a rock concert. That's not what that's not what that is.
Other questions, general questions before we take on the pool? I had a couple then. Talk to me about the bike pedestrian separation on the trail. What does that look like, and how extensive is it?
I want to answer this one because Commissioner Rugg was a very early and articulate spokesperson for wanting gravel instead of all just concrete and pavers, pervious or not pervious. So this there's a lot of gravel surfaces. Thanks, read my mind. There's a lot of gravel surfaces in the design around a parking lot, and a lot of the spaces between the walking path, the Hopper Creek Trail, and back here. DG, or essentially a version of what's just been poured at the Vine Trail between St. Helena and Calistoga, Tunnel Tops and Presidio. It's the same product. This Hopper Creek Trail, which is about 8 to 10 feet, depending on kind of where you are, is part of the emergency access. Obviously, it's not a vehicle access outside of emergencies, but we need a little more wider access for fire. So we used this trail, and we're adding a 5-foot gravel walking path next to it, which is, I was excited to tell the commission this afternoon. And that continues all the way up here until sort of the gravel parking lot. So there's a half a mile of walking trails without passing or looping yourself through here. There's a couple of sidewalks. There's a paved way down here. But in terms of getting through here and wanting to get out of the bike lane, for example, there is a walking path next to the bike lane, because I think this will be a busy pathway. Does that answer your question?
Yes. It only exists in the area of the commons. It's not intended to continue beyond the commons, say behind Hopper Creek condos.
Correct. They don't have room for something like that over there because of how close the housing is. We moved things back away from the trail over here for a lot of different reasons, the trail being one of them. And we also got questions for the pedestrian bike and driving. Even though there's not a curb, there's a series of bollards along here next to the greenhouse and storage sheds, so that somebody walking in to the project to park or just to continue on this Midtown connector can also walk without having to sort of get into this busy driveway.
And do the bikes go in the driveway, or?
The bikes go in the driveway. We're talking about a separated pedestrian path, which is really effectively the 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk that's there now. It would be down at level and paved, but the bollard would protect people working around the garden and walking sort of by the garden without sort of getting in the way of cars and moving vehicles like bikes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. With respect to the Midtown connector, I've tried to stay abreast of that, but I'm not completely clear of I understand the stamped bricks essentially, but where exactly do the stamped bricks go relative to a parked car?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we will see it here in a week or two. They can be parked on. So I think what we're looking at, because of how the intersection at Washington and Weber works, that will be a four-way stop, which then the whole thing will, in essence, be stamped asphalt. Okay, it won't be crosswalks because it's what I think of as a scramble intersection, if you're familiar with how it works. So you will be able to cross diagonally, because that's generally the flow when you go from Vandeleur Park to the French Laundry Garden. So imagine that whole intersection as stamped asphalt. To the west, toward the Vine Trail, I think it's 8 feet. Is that what we ended up with, John? So you'll have 8 feet of stamped asphalt on the south side. And then when you cross Washington, it will go to the north side. And so that then means it basically terminates into the crosswalk, which is where the garden is. It sort of makes its way so that we're not going to redo the intersection at Yount and Weber until we do construction for the Commons. But that will then become kind of a raised crosswalk, another sort of controlled intersection when we do that. So does that make sense, what I just said, in terms of how it makes its way?
So the stamped part on the north side of Weber in the area between Jefferson and Yount is going to be where cars would park. It's going to be offset from where cars would park.
It's going to be offset from where cars would park. There's a visual. I wish it's easier. Picture shows 1,000 words kind of thing. But
So, John Ferns, Public Works Director, the intent is to have the advisory lane adjacent to where the cars park. So from Jefferson to Yount Street, the cars that you see parked on the street there, the advisory lane will be immediately south of that. So you'd be walking or riding your bike in a lane adjacent to the parked cars.
Okay.
And then on the north side, there is no parking. No, on the west side, there is no parking on the south side, so there's no car.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that clarification, because I'd been asked that and I couldn't answer it. Okay, I think my last general question, because some people, even though we're way down on this project, we've done a lot of work. There are still some people that say the last thing Yountville needs is more park, and we need more housing. And we've talked about a phased approach, and this could be built in 2 phases. But is there any legal requirement, say in a dozen years, that we need even more housing, that we don't put housing in the meadow area? Because my understanding is there's a state law that requires when a public entity takes over land from another public entity in which that previous use was playfield or open space, that it has some portion of it has to remain that. Can you clarify that for me, please?
yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is housing laws change every year. So to suggest what it's going to be in 12 years is, a guess. But I think as it relates to today, we are going through the entitlement process, which is, sequestration on the train metaphor. That will require, a specific land use designation. It'll deal with the zoning issues. It'll deal with the issue that you are referring to. So all of that will be encompassed. The documents are being worked out right now, and there is obviously a legal process we're going through, which, we intend to be in front of ZDRB in November and the council in December.
So to summarize, in the current legal environment, there is some requirement that some portion of this remains open space or ball field or public play field.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think, there's always the town standards in terms of what's required, for common open space, et cetera. I do know that we're working through, and it's different the town developing it versus a developer developing it. So this is where I'm not sure you're referring to a law that I'm not familiar with, so I don't want to pretend to know. But I do know what your point is, and I do, again, when those documents are all created, this discussion has happened, and we will make sure that we are, obviously abiding by the law. We do have a good lawyer who usually sits next to me.
Great. Okay, so if anybody else doesn't have any specific questions, I say propose we move forward on the pool.
Do you want to take public comment?
Oh, yes, of course. Lee, any public
I
comment?
don't want to get Lee angry. You can come to, it's a, come to the.
Oh, all right. So, Lee Richardson, you were just talking about the bicycle walking path, and it sounded to me like it's cars, walking path, street. Is that correct?
No. What I was describing back on Hopper Creek is,
Talking about the yeah.
The Midtown Connector is what you're talking about. Yeah, it's all street. Let's start with that. An advisory lane is just that. It's just sort of giving you a visual so that, bikes and peds, have a path to follow. How it will be stamped will be, there will be street, then there will be stamped, and then there will be, I should say, asphalt, stamped asphalt, asphalt. So where the cars are currently parking on the north side of Weber between Jefferson and Yount, there will be, 6 feet of asphalt where the cars park. Then there'll be sort of a roughly 8-foot advisory lane, which all it is advisory. You can drive on it. And then there will be asphalt.
That makes it sound to me like it's not possible to separate pedestrian and bicycle from the traffic.
That's right. You can't.
With the cars that are parked.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
enough room.
Not enough room. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the other thing.
Okay, so we've taken public comment. We're to the pool. The town manager has proposed 3 possible configurations. Anybody want to jump in, Myrna?
Just to clarify, 3 operating models and 2 configurations. If
Correct.
Yeah. Thanks.
I want to get more into the feasibility element of the pool, but first I want to ask you, what, in terms of phasing in the pool, where is it going to? Where are you projecting that would phase in? Would we have residents in that community by the time you decide to build, theoretically, if you were to build a pool?
It could be either first or second vertical phase. I think we're talking, if you've listened about horizontal and vertical. So horizontal is doing all of the utilities and all the site work and the grading and, basically, what they call engineered or finished pads for construction. In that phase, I don't think, other than the utilities, you would have to really consider the pool. But as you get into the vertical, that's when, okay, what are you building? This is going to be a question for, funding junction, but I do think you could build it at any time. I think that the other reality of creeping a flat, let's just call it multifunction surface, is like, as long as there was the opportunity to build a pool in the future, you could do that. You're not going to build a building there, I guess what I'm saying.
Well, the reason I asked the question has to do with demand. And, there may be a certain level of demand for a pool right now within the town of Yountville and the population we have. That demand may be adjusted if there were people living in Yountville Commons. And so that is a variable, until we have residents there, that's a variable that we can't right now account for. So I just wanted to kind of, I've been sort of ruminating on that. And the idea of demand and feasibility is something I've also been thinking quite a bit about, because we did a survey several years ago before, the acquisition of the property, and people volunteered, and a handful of people volunteered an interest in having a pool, among other things. But we didn't. It wasn't one of these quantified questions that you could actually project a real number against. I mean, there was some interest, and I think that the interest, in my opinion, was not necessarily for a lap pool. My gut tells me that it was more of like the pool that we used to have available up at the Veterans Home, a bigger pool, a pool where you could bring your families and hang out on lounge chairs, and that is not something that really has been even suggested now. So I think what the survey results that we had then related to one kind of pool is my estimation. It's not, it's a guess. And we've never really done a survey that even attempts to quantify the interest and demand for a lap pool and how many people in our town would use it. So I guess, I've been sort of struggling with all the expenses surrounding the possibility of a lap pool. And I've talked to a number of my friends who are swimmers and would probably use it. But 3 or 4 people does not pay for a pool, and it certainly doesn't pay for the sustainability of a pool, all the maintenance that goes into it and all the management that goes into it. And so I guess my thinking is that we'd need to do some kind of a realistic projection of demand, and I'm not quite sure how that would happen, but it really seems to me that it could be a very daunting expenditure, not only to start, but moving forward. If we don't have the demand that's going to cover the expenses at some point, it's going to be a losing proposition financially. And I was really intrigued. This is the first time I saw this sport court option, because that is another option. It's obviously, and it appears to be a much less expensive option. So if our community had a chance to really weigh in on these relative options, we might be able to, if we were able to really get a quantifiable number, we might be able to see whether or not where the demand really lies for one or the other, or maybe neither. But I think that research needs to be done, because it is when I think about the build-outs at Yountville Fit, and of course I think the town would partner with Yountville Fit not only to build it, but maybe even in programming things post the development of the pool. But it's just going to require a lot of physical maintenance, a lot of staff maintenance from somebody, not necessarily the town. But, that all has to pencil out. And it will only pencil out, in my opinion, if the demand is really there.
Yeah. No, it's good comments. I think what I want to ask you, just if I can ask a question, because and Sam and I were talking about this. There was some data that was done, and I think you're right. It was sort of based on the former model or the pool that was. But in terms of the demand analysis, are you thinking of this both as a municipal pool and I'm just going to say hybrid, or just as a hybrid?
Definitely as a hybrid. I don't think this could. I don't think if we restrict the pool to just one segment of the population, it would fly necessarily. I mean, I guess if you open it up to the entire public of the Napa Valley, maybe we could cover those costs. I think it has to be first and foremost for the residents of Yountville, but also we are going to have to open it up beyond that. It will obviously be a pay-to-use thing, a monthly pay-to-use. I'm not saying anything that you don't already know. But I do think that there has to be some estimate, at least within the town, of demand and genuine interest in order to justify the expense.
No, that's right. I think I'm trying to narrow down the options, because obviously research can be, it's hard to pin down an answer if you're asking every question. But I think... And I think Donovan's listening at home. I talked to him yesterday. He does have experience with Calistoga in terms of operating and programming pools. So what I heard from you is the hybrid model. This would mean, in my mind, like we could work with him, but it really is a demand analysis that Donovan would sort of, lead in terms of how many are your members or how many new members, and and just so you know, because I've thought about this, the lease we currently have with Donovan is basically sort of a 50-50 with a break-even clause in it, which means he put in 50 of the town put in 50% of the upfront cost, and then it is sustaining itself now, but we're still working to the break-even point where he can actually make money. I think there's opportunities through lease terms to address this, because I also told Donovan, like, if you are bullish based on your research that it's going to pay for itself, then like we can memorialize this in a contract, So that's just another way to think about it, just because, again, we already have an arrangement. It is working, and I do think the community's appreciating it, and it's obviously it is designed for residents in many ways, especially the rate structure, but even kind of the facility and the lack of facilities in some cases. So thank you for your...
So to summarize what I think you said, Myrna, was that you favor a municipal option that's a hybrid, that it would be both lap swimming and also people could recreate there at other times.
No, I'm not expecting it to be recreational. But I do think that it's possible, for example, to do swimming lessons there, have a segment of time that's allocated to things like even children's swimming lessons or water aerobics. I mean, I think there's a way to segment that. But in terms of who gets to use it, there has to be some kind of an ongoing payment structure to be able to use it.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think just so we're using the right language, I think what I heard was the hybrid, and I think when I hear municipal, I think of a public pool, and so I don't think that's what I heard. I think municipal and public to me are synonymous. Still a fee for service, by the way, but typically operated by the municipality, more of what you had at the vet's home. This would be a hybrid, would be operated through someone like Donovan, and that would be a membership, and he would be responsible for the operation, including programming. And I did want to point out, if you look at the pool design, maybe Sam or whoever's got the clicker, I guess I do, go to the next, that's the one I wanted there. You can see the outline of the pool has 3 lap swimming pool, and then this square to the right is really intended for exercise, or you could do swim lessons for toddlers, et cetera. There is kind of a hot tub hiding in the corner there. And I think those things are important when you want to talk about membership, because I do think people that are going to join and pay a fee are going to want to have, experience or a environment that's worth paying for. So that was the design that at least we did to show this is, an exercise pool, but it also has some functionality to it to have expanded programming.
Okay, Lorene.
First, I want to thank you for maintaining this pool, because I know some of you are not big proponents of it. However, my opinion is a municipal pool is not a money-making thing. It's a public safety thing, and it's a public, it's to serve the needs of the public. The private piece of it, I am not in favor of that at all. We already have at least 2 housing communities that have their own private pools that nobody else has, and this would be a third at least. I think there's at least 2. I don't know, there may be even more. So I would really not like to see a private, just only residence here, because we already have that. The hybrid idea, I belong to HealthQuest. I can go to that pool, but really nobody else can. So I'm not really in favor of that, because people can't use it. The general public can't use it. I like the idea, and Myrna keeps talking about it's a lap pool, but it's not just a lap pool. Yeah, I think kids can have swim lessons. The water aerobics classes. it's more than, to me, it's more than just kind of a recreation. It's a public safety and it's a public use.
So, Lorene, who would actually direct?
Run it?
Yeah, who would run it in your vision?
Well, I think it would be Parks and Rec, the town of Yountville. So, because I can't imagine anybody else running it.
Vince?
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's thoughts. I think one thing that I would like us to really be thoughtful about is the economic benefit of having an operator there. And I'm big on municipal management, ownership, and 100% access. But sometimes you can't make that happen. Like golf now is a loser. Like no municipal anything is going to build a golf course and say it's free. We do a great job with programming, this department, your departments, and we do a great job. But in order to find ways to create even more opportunities, I think the Yountville Fit model is something that has so far worked well and hasn't even really begun to peak. I don't consider that if you add swimming and those kinds of activities to that hybrid model, I don't think that necessarily makes it an orange square, because you can join. Like at the YMCA, you have to join. That's what we used to have in San Francisco. So what would be really persuasive as far as I'm concerned is what the town and the operator think, and whether that creates a more robust operation for us to make sure that additional amenities are at least made available, if not free to access. Like they're not going to hand everybody a key, but everybody would have an opportunity. And the clarifying question I'd like to have answered is, does the hybrid make the square orange, or does the hybrid make the square just not light green?
Yeah, I would keep it green. It's definitely not orange because
okay.
It is accessible, but for a fee. But so is a municipal pool, just so you know. I mean, it's just a different level of a fee and different level of service. So, I'm trying to define 3 operating types, but it's clearly, sort of we called it a prism the other day. It's like a lot of angles and options. But I do think we can try to quantify those, and I think that, but it's a hard thing to do. This is where I'm trying to hesitant to saying, oh, we're going to do a survey or do research and somehow out pops a number. What we can do, is talk about what it cost when we used to run the pool and what the fees, but I actually didn't even know until today. It was only open 3 months out of the year. So that's a different thing too, right? I don't think we would want to have an exercise pool only open 3 months out of the year. So there's a lot of angles, a lot of variables. Our goal today is to listen to all your thoughts, and you can already see, we've already heard 3 different thoughts, and I think we'll try to do the analysis. We can do some research to try to, weigh both the revenue and figure out also what the operating costs could be, because that will change. If we're running it, it's a different business model than someone, on a lot of levels, insurance, lifeguards, things that are factors. So we'll just keep taking your input. Yeah.
I'll just add real quick, if I may. I want to associate myself also with Commissioner David's comments, because even though I would love everything to be made available and free of charge, I do agree, based on my limited knowledge of staffing and insurance and then all the unpredictable costs, I would worry that for a few people, the rest of the town would be left holding the bag with that model. Like, just put the pool into Sam's portfolio and staff up and just hope for the best. That concerns me more than anything, I think.
Terry, did you have anything you wanted to add at this point?
I think that as David has raised some really good issues based on longevity here in Yountville, I'm trying to visualize how access to a pool could be a perk for residents of the Commons something attractive. I think it is a very logical fit for folks who are members of the gym and use the gym. But I live in one of the communities that has a pool that has many days. It's a heated pool many days of the year where not a single person uses that.
Terry, can you make sure your mic is on? I'm sorry. The green light should pop up.
Yeah, green light's on.
Oh, perfect.
There.
Every time I say Terry, it thinks I said Terry. I'm so sorry.
So I'm just, I think it needs more study. If Donovan has experience with running a pool in Calistoga, perhaps he can shed some light on that. Lots to think about.
I did just want to answer. So when we were looking at the closure of the Veterans Home pool, we did considerable research, and the question had come up of how many pools are available. So in the different homeowners associations or manufactured home communities, so there are private pools for 443 housing units. So those are communal pools that those people can access, and that's of at the time 1,300 Yountville housing units. So 443 were served by a communal pool, and then there's another 41 private pools in town that were through the various methods we were able to identify. So just to answer that question for you, yeah.
Go
So
ahead, Mark.
close to a third of the population has access to a pool. Is that correct?
Yes, somehow, yeah.
I just wanted to weigh in, too, on the sport court, which is obviously a new element that has been considered, which would be pretty reasonable to put into the mix. And that could be something that is accessible anywhere to anyone, or it could be managed by Yountville Fit as part of as one of their programs. But it may be the kind of thing that would appeal to a broad group of people, and it wouldn't cost as much to implement and maintain. It would probably cost very little.
Well, and that's why we presented it, so you have all options.
I
But I
think
would tell you that if we did the sport court, I think it would be public. And just like Yountville Fit uses the outside now, I mean, they'll use it for classes and things. It would be fine. But I think we would control it as the town and work with Yountville Fit. So I do think that's a public option versus the other three that I'm trying to.
And something Brad and I spoke about earlier was that if we did go that route, it would be really difficult to build a pool and then decide later on that we wanted a sport court instead. But building a sport court down the road, you could say, 8 or 10 years, we do need this pool. So something to consider as well.
Any other thoughts before I weigh in? I heard pretty clearly at some of the things that I attended that there's a segment of the community that is not interested in subsidizing more development of amenities. I heard if there is subsidies, then that amenity needs to be available to the general public. So I think it would be wise to keep that sentiment in mind, because very likely there is the potential that there could be subsidies at various levels for this whole development. We were already subsidizing with the purchase of the property. We're subsidizing Yountville Fit, and we have other subsidies. If I were to have to say yes or no to a pool, I think I would put my thoughts on the hybrid option. I think private only is a real negative to many residents. It might be a nice thing, but for workforce housing, which is already in many ways subsidized, I think there would be a segment of the population which would be very upset with that. With respect to usage, I think I want to have us remember what Terry said about her experience with respect to the sports courts. They're attractive, they're wonderful, but whether it be the library or whether it be a certain portion of the town programming or the pickleball courts, our amenities are greatly enjoyed by a lot of people from outside the area. So I think we should think long and hard about building amenities that duplicate existing amenities that would largely benefit people from outside the area, considering that we're going to be subsidizing or likely subsidizing a significant portion of this. So I'm happy to entertain further discussion or comments, but happy also to put this to rest if no one has any other thoughts.
Could I add one thing? Sorry.
Yes, we're going to just check and see if anybody has anything here, and then Samantha, anything from you?
I just wanted to point out at the end of the master plan that we completed, there is the white paper on the pool that we did when the town council approved to close it. And so if you are interested in looking at more data on what resident utilization was, and it went back 9 years of data, you can take a look at that. But resident utilization averaged about 24% of the users of the Veterans Home Pool. So there's a lot of data in that report. So I just wanted to let you and the public know that that's part of the attachments to the master plan that we completed. So thank you.
Lee, did you have comments you want to make at this point?
I just have another question. I haven't heard this talked about, Lee Richardson. Does the physical configuration of the pool change depending on what choices you make about the three options, yada, yada? Or is it always three lap pool?
Well, I'm trying to limit the variables, but I mean, clearly it could be a different configuration. I mean, this gets into, I mean, in my previous jurisdiction, we had an Olympic pool, so I've managed an Olympic pool, but obviously space is a consideration here. So we tried to do an efficient pool that could provide, probably the most. The other, I think, key consideration on that front is the depth, because once you go beyond a certain depth, it does create, safety and lifeguard issues, et cetera. So there's a lot of angles to this. I appreciate all the input. I think the last thing I'll say on this subject is obviously I take my lead from the council, but I think this is an issue that we need to decide on before we get to funding junction, because there could be the option of, hey, let's phase it and let's just do something, and maybe that's the practical approach. But what we can't do is get to funding junction and have a pool hold up 125 workforce housing units, because it's too complicated of an analysis to make a decision on, right? I mean, this is important, but relative speaking. So I feel like, and I'll talk it over again with the council. I'd really like to get to a resolution. I will talk to Donovan and ask what sort of research he might be able to conduct on the hybrid model. We can do whatever. I feel like the private model is sort of almost off the table. I think that was consensus here today. So we can at least take one option off the table. And then, we'll try before, maybe before the end of the year, Sam and I can talk about how do we present an item before the council. And maybe we even come back to you before we do that and say, hey, here's the narrowed analysis, and have a vote versus, a conversation. And that might be useful. So stay tuned. We'll try to get to the bottom of this.
All right. Are we ready to move on to item 7B, the review and approval of the amendment to the ADA transition plan?
Thank you, Chair. I am John Ferns, your Public Works Director. Rosalba Ramirez, Deputy Public Works Director, is normally at these meetings, but combination of the Commons and this brought me out late at night. And if you thought that was complicated, wait till you get this report. Yes. So I'm going to do my best to simplify it and then set the stage a little bit. So setting the stage a little bit, as a public agency, we use public money. And everyone in the public needs equal access to all the facilities that we provide. And so in order for public agencies to do their best at providing equal access to everyone, there's rules put in place at the federal, state, and local level that say you need to evaluate your facilities. And the expectation is if you evaluate your facilities, they're not expecting you to go fix everything all at once. It's an unreasonable task to assign to a town, especially a town of certain ages like ours. It's not a brand new town. And so my slideshow is not that long, so bear with me. So the tool that was given to us to do that is called a self-evaluation transition plan. It's a big phrase for essentially a method of looking at all of your facilities, identifying them, prioritizing them, and scheduling them into our capital improvement program, where we then repair them along the way as funding becomes allowed. And so the first version of this dates back to 2015, and the town hired a consultant who evaluated all of the town's facilities, not just the parks and the recreation facilities, but everything, this building, all of the stuff, the wastewater treatment plant. And so out of that came a identified list of projects that then my predecessors assigned to capital improvement programs, and many of those things have been repaired along the way. And so as we were making our way through that list, some of the projects that were identified came up and had to come to council for approval because of the modifications that they would require. And that triggered this conversation that we're about to have. And so just to refresh everybody's, or bring the new people up to speed, the two projects that really triggered this new conversation are in the Washington Park neighborhood. So there's Forester Park, which has a playground in it, and street parking. And then Three Weirs Park, which is a passive park that has a path to a bridge to the Hopper Creek path. And so the 2015 version of that self-evaluation transition plan identified those two as needing some improvements, and the improvements in question were ADA parking stalls, as well as improving the path from Forester Avenue to the bridge to get to the Hopper Creek path. And so there was a lot of people in the community that thought that was a little extreme and asked for us to evaluate that. And so that's where we are now. And so next slide, please. And so this is what I was referring to. Title II of the ADA requires that all of our services and facilities must be accessible. However, it's when it's viewed in its entirety. So that's a theme that you'll hear as this conversation goes along. If anything we're building new clearly needs to be fully ADA accessible. This project before you, there won't be anything that isn't ADA accessible. It'll all be built to modern standards. And then funding for projects is oftentimes triggered to make sure that you do have that ADA transition plan in place. If we ignored it and said we're not going to do this, lots of funding opportunities would go away because we're not offering equal access to all of our residents. Next slide, please. Should I be doing this, or do you mind doing that? I didn't ask. Okay. And so, again, I should have had the slides going as I was talking earlier. The purpose of the self-evaluation and transition plan is what we talked about. It gave us the implementation strategy. It triggered the reevaluation in 2023 when certain projects came up, and then it brings us to the role of the ADA specialist. And so there is a field of endeavor that you are what's considered a CASP, a Certified Access Specialist. And so we sought out the firm that did the original one in 2015, and they declined to evaluate us currently. I don't know their reasons. We just respect them, and we found another one based in Santa Rosa, and we hired them to do, next slide please, to do what council directed us to do. So that conversation about those 2 parking spaces and the overall impacts to the community came to town council at their request because they were watching the PRAC meetings and hearing the conversations. And so they directed staff to go hire a CAS specialist to reevaluate the parks, not the entire town and all of its facility, but specific to the parks and the programs that we offer through Sam's department. Back up. Sorry. And so we were instructed to do that. We did hire the person, but we did keep focus on that 3-weir ramp and how, if there was an evaluation there, that would trigger us to want to do the repairs there. And so that was the trigger. So that would remain a focus in the study, but they did look at all the parks, as you'll see. Next slide, please. And so we collaborated with consultants who identified barriers, proposed structural and non-structural changes to the parks. And then I think oftentimes when we refer to programs, it's easier to substitute the word activities. And so programs and activities are interchangeable in this conversation. And so activity access in the public park system. And so the underlying theme that you'll hear or that came out of this is the town's not obligated to provide equal activity access across all of our parks. And so if a certain park isn't suited for a certain activity, but that activity is happening in another park, you don't need to upgrade that park to suit it for that activity because the activity is being provided elsewhere. And so we did review 10 parks for barriers and access options. Next slide, please. And then programs and activities must be accessible even if the facilities are not. So there is a range along this continuum where activities are accessible at the community center, so they don't have to be accessible at Three Rivers Park. And you can achieve accessibility by relocating those programs to different places if the other places are suited for that. And then oftentimes the general understanding of this is Title III ADA, which more applies to the private sector, where it requires physical barrier removal privately owned signs across the board. So the town is, because as a public agency, we're not bound to the same rules as a private facility. So a private facility is bound to upgrading all of their facilities at one time to be ADA compliant. Next slide, please. And so in the report that was provided in the staff report, it developed a matrix that showed accessibility features across the parks. And by parks, we say the parks, the parking at the parks, the trails, the playgrounds, the restrooms, and then the events that we host at that park. And all of that information was used to determine the programmatic activity needs and the barrier removal needs. Next slide, please. And so this was in the report that you saw. This is really the meat of the report. Green is a priority 1, which means full barrier removal required. And so that's really the basic ones where there's an impediment on the ground that stops people from getting from here to there if they have the need for a wheelchair or a walker or some aided device. And so the priority 1 ones are identified as being needed to be repaired as soon as funding becomes available. Priority 2 are minor barriers that can be built into the programs at a later date. And then priority 3 is limited accessibility, but the programs are accessible elsewhere. And so what we're doing now with this new information is presenting it to you, and then we'll present it to council, and then these projects or these barriers that are identified in this program matrix will get built into the ongoing capital improvement program where we fix them along the way. And so a good example of that is what we call Hopper Creek Pocket Park, which is the one on Washington Street next to the French Laundry Garden. And so there's barriers with the sidewalk that have been identified there. We, as part of the Washington Street Corridor Project and part of the mobility program currently in the CIP, as well as the art program, that we're looking at that park for, we know this needs to be fixed, so we're going to fix it as part of those projects. There are other projects along the way that might not be built into a bigger project, and we'll repair those as we go. And then it's also important to know that we have a line item in the capital improvement budget program, a budgeted line item in the capital improvement program that refers to ADA accessibility, and it gives us the funding to do projects identified here as needed, or if the priority changes because of an event or another project, we can draw from that. And so that's really the basis of all of this, is updating that report from 2015. Things have changed. We have repaired a lot of things from that upgraded things from the 2015 report. This gives us a fresh new look at it, and we can update the CIP and keep things moving. And the one big takeaway from all of this is this version of the report identified that we do not need to install an ADA parking stall at Forester Park or an ADA parking stall at Three Weirs Park. However, we do need to improve ADA access to the ramp that leads from Forester Avenue up to the bridge. And so there will be park projects that will be happening, but essentially the one that started this conversation about the parking stalls, that part of it's going away. And then I think my next slide is just the summary, where it's a reminder that programs or activities must be accessible when viewed in their entirety. And we kind of lost focus of that when we were looking at Three Weirs and Forester Park. And then the barrier removals will be prioritized based on I have a hard time with that word, programmatic needs, activity needs. And then the reminder is we should also review this and update this plan probably more often than 10 years. And so with that, I'm available with any questions.
Thank you for that excellent summary, and thank you and your consultant for what I consider to be an incredibly thorough and broad look at everything. So the way I'd like to approach this, if nobody has another idea, is I'd like to first get into any general questions or across the board comments, and then I'd like to very briefly just go through each park, not worried about whether the height of the dog mitt is correct or anything else, but this sort of thing triggers people, and I just want to make sure that we have done due diligence to put into the public record that we looked at this, and in most of these cases, nobody's going to notice anything. But in the case where something might be noticed, I would at least like to have a conversation of it on a park-by-park basis. So if that's okay with everybody, I would like to then proceed with any general comments or observations before we get on. Would you like to go first?
So I understand that today that we are being asked to approve this project going to the next phase, which would be the town council approval.
Yes.
And I was just, thinking about what Alan just said, and I'm wondering there's obviously, looks like 4 parks that really need, have various barriers have to really be focused on, and you will start with that. And I was wondering what the sort of the timeline is for phasing in all these other parks, because obviously you've done a comprehensive overview and you're going to move forward ultimately with all of them, but it will be phased in, I assume, by the priority 1 green parks, and then move on.
Correct. We do like to take advantage if we have a contractor in town doing work. And so I don't have a specific schedule yet for each of these specific repairs. But for example, we do have a concrete contractor coming in to do some work in the first part of October. And we've identified a few of these, which I don't know off the top of my head, I apologize, that he's going to be working on to repair. And so we are actively pursuing fixing a lot of these fairly quickly.
Okay, well then that actually addresses one component of my question. It sounds like if there's some barriers that have to be removed or fixes that have to be made, even in some of these maybe lesser priority parks, because you might be working on them with a particular contractor, you're not just going to simply focus on the green parks first and then move on. You're going to apply these, different remedies as the contractors become available?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other thoughts? Terry?
Yeah. As I reviewed the excruciating detail in the report, my first takeaway was, wow. But then I wondered about systems and how do things happen where something says, oh, we need to install a signboard for the bocce scheduling, and so somebody, takes their drill and takes screws and goes out and installs it, or stuff gets installed in a restroom, and then, some of the minutiae was like, oh, that paper towel dispenser is so many inches too far this way or too far that way. My question is, what system is in place on the front end going forward in not remediating stuff, but for new things, so that they're compliant with some version of the ADA and they won't turn up on the next 10-year interval when you have a CASP person come and evaluate it?
So there's multiple layers to that. The way Public Works, well, it's hard. Let me think of the way to describe this. It's kind of like the horizontal and the vertical that we were talking about earlier. The sidewalks, the hardscape, the sidewalk, and the parks, both Rosalba and I are registered engineers, and we're up to speed on the ADA laws and requirements for the flat work and the horizontal work that needs to be constructed or adjusted for new construction. And so when we design things and we implement things, we do comply with ADA rules for essentially the outside stuff. For the inside stuff, we have a chief building official who works in our building department who inspects construction, both residential and commercial, for these types of things. And so he is a resource for us when we're going to install or adjust things, we do our best to check in with him and make sure that we're complying with the ADA rules for the inside stuff. And the example that I would give is kind of a combination. For the art walk, we installed a new piece of art. Our staff that installed it knew to ask the question, hey, what height should I install this new signpost for? And so they checked in with us. We referred to this and determined it needed to be between 15 and 44 inches, and they made sure they installed it within those tolerances. So we do have internal checks and balances along the way to make sure that we are complying with the building code is tied to the ADA code for the inside stuff, and then Caltrans and our local standards are tied to the outside stuff. Hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you.
Other comments? Okay. So I have one question that kind of follows up on that, and specifically VM1 and VM2, which were completed. This is the striping and the transition of the new thing that Resolva reported to us. This is a Veterans Memorial Park. It's the new parking structure, or ADA compliant parking that you guys just built. And yet it was out of compliance in some minute way.
Right. What happens?
Yeah.
So honestly, we make a judgment on the compliance part of it, and if it's within tolerance, we won't rip it out and replace it. We do have to make judgment calls on these things. Our contractors do the best that they can, but there are occasions when it's out of tolerance
Yeah.
and slight. And
Yeah.
so we do our best to provide access.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the main park, the new stairway that is just a year or two old is not wide enough, and
Right.
the railing's the wrong height.
Right.
So how do we prevent that from happening in the future?
That's one where it did slip through the building permit crack because of the way that particular project was constructed. And so I refer back to those same checks and balances where we do our best to make sure that we're consulting with amongst ourselves and the experts if there's questions.
Yeah, I would just wonder if it would be beneficial to have maybe this ADA compliance group on retainer so you could just reach out to them or something.
Well, I think as things evolve like this project before you, yes, there will be definitely an ADA component to it to make sure that we are compliant.
Yeah.
Both in design and construction.
So this next question is a little bit of a follow-up on what Terry was talking about. I was surprised by the number of times in the ADA report that they said that there was no history or of the construction or alteration dates. Maybe 6 times out of 10 parks they made that comment. So do we now have systems in place that when we make a change to a park or something like that, that gets documented in a way that we can easily find?
Yes. The 2 things happened is one, the master plan
Parks
helped
and-
dig out a lot of that background information.
Yeah.
And the other piece is we have an asset management system in place.
Perfect.
That our municipal operations team uses. And so between us here that work in the Public Works admin and town hall and the guys that work out at the corporation yard, we have, it's called iWork, but it's a digital asset management system that tracks work orders, work completion, dates, what work was done. And so we do, when you see our crews out working in the parks or on these buildings, that gets logged into that system, and we are able to keep track of that. And that system is about 6 or 7 years old, so we have a good history built into it now.
Okay.
And then what's adding to that is the See Click Fix option. So I don't know if we've talked about that as a group here, but the external tool for residents to report something that they see as a problem, if a sign gets knocked down or they saw somebody trip on a crack in a park or whatever, there's the See Click Fix app, which you can have on your device, or go to the link on the website, and it allows you to report to us what you saw or what needs to be fixed. And then that triggers the other system to cause somebody to go out and fix it and have it be logged.
Great. I'm glad that that's in place. One of the things that came up many, many times was that the decomposed granite requires maintenance.
Yes.
Is there a way, are you guys thinking collectively of maybe pavers or some other way of,
Yes.
I mean, I like permeable pavement a great deal, but I realize that there's no way DG is going to work.
Right. And the challenge that we have is every few years there's a new DG project that says it'll be stabilized and stand up to the wear and tear of the public, and it doesn't. So Sam and I collaborate with our guys that have to fix that all the time. And we're also we do communicate and work with other agencies. The example I would give is the Vine Trail. And we had, I'm on the engineering committee for the Vine Trail, and we have long-standing conversations about the surfaces, and that reach from St. Helena to Calistoga, the Vine Trail was convinced that there were alternative surfaces that were stabilized DG that would be up to the task, and they've already learned that they're not. So as an engineer, I want everything to be concrete. And so anytime something erodes, I just want to put concrete in there because I know that will solve the problem. But that doesn't give the park the amenity or the feel that Yountville is deserved. So that's where Sam comes in and says, no, we need to have a better solution than making everything.
Soften that up a little
Yeah,
bit.
making everything
But as
concrete.
you remember, we went from pea gravel to the decomp, which, unfortunately, when that project bid and the contractor said, oh, yeah, it's going to be fine, and we saw it, especially during those really wet winters, is where the impacts have been so great. But, we're looking at both Veterans Park and Yountville Community Park for how to improve that.
Picnic Area 1, I hear constantly from our crews out there, what are we going to do about this? So we are working on that.
So no silver bullet at this point in terms of.
No, we thought, there were some landscape architects in town recently were like, oh, we got a great idea. And they sent it and we were like, oh, we've used that already. Yeah. So there are some new things coming online. I mean, we're looking at some things with the parking lot at Veterans Memorial Park. So, we're always I think that philosophy of seeing other people test it out first has, will help us along the line. But
Great. So you say here at the end of the fiscal impact, you say there's no fiscal impact and it's currently budgeted and is it mandatory or discretionary? I guess maybe I don't understand those, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but how can it be budgeted and not have a fiscal impact, I guess?
Well, so it's the decision, that's our standard staff report form. And so I think that the intent of that is there a fiscal impact with this decision that you're about to make? And the answer is no, because we do have ADA. You're not causing us to go do something that's going to trigger some money to be spent, but it is budgeted because of what we referred to earlier with the CP is referring to the capital improvement project number of CP 2026, which is our ADA programmatic budget for doing ADA repairs on town facilities.
Okay, great. Thank you. I understand that. So I know when you started, when the Forester and Three Weirs Park came before you, I don't think we had any idea that we would end up here. Maybe you did. I sure did not.
No, I did not either.
Do you think this is relative to where we were before we implemented this? And it's not that we can do anything about it. I'm just curious. Is this a 10K hit, a 100K hit, a million hit, several million hit? What is the difference between what we thought we were going to do and what we now know we have to do? Just ballpark.
I don't think, order of magnitude, I don't think it's a big difference from what we thought we were going to do to what this says we should do now. I think order of magnitude, it's similar. And if we were to add all these up, it would probably be less than $1 million if we could do it all at once. And so we're not talking about really big numbers or really big projects.
Great. That's super. And the last thing here before we get into the park by park is would it help if once a year we reviewed this with you as a way to just to stay in touch with this? I'm not saying we should. I'm just throwing it out as a possible idea.
I think for presence of mind that this is an important thing for the town to do, and it's a communication item. We do this internally when we're looking at every year's capital improvement program, and so we build it into the budget, but we don't come to a public meeting and address those specific items. The budget gets adopted at a council meeting, and projects are identified in there, but the finer points of those projects that would address this list aren't highlighted. So I think, yes, there would be value in us coming annually and saying, hey, just updating you on the progress on the evaluation and transition plan. And we would identify projects that have happened and then the ones that are identified coming in the new capital improvement program. I think that's an easy ask, and it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, as long as you guys are okay with that way.
And I think as John comes towards the end of each fiscal year with an update on the CIP projects, I think it could just really roll into something
Perfect.
that we are already
Perfect.
doing.
Yeah, I remember we do the CIP. This would be a great time to do both. Okay, I know we're dragging on here, so I'm happy to just go park by park, and I'll tell you what I see, and you guys just tell me if I'm wrong. Bardesano, not likely to be noticed by anybody, the changes at Bardesano.
They've actually already occurred.
Good, perfect.
We already moved the trash can and the receptacle
Yes.
when we did a different project there.
Perfect. And Forester Park, nobody's going to notice anything.
No.
No.
The Hopper Creek project, Hopper Creek Pocket Park, to me, that's a pretty significant plan. I know that you just got approval from Thomas Keller with the path in front of there, but there's artwork and there's the barrel. What's the plan?
So the
Barrel's gone.
Yeah, the book barrel, and I'm happy to say this in public because we get a lot of questions about it. The book barrel was obliterated by a tree branch during a storm.
Okay.
And so we didn't actually take it out for any purpose related to this or any else. It was obliterated, unfortunately, by a tree branch that fell.
And we met with the
Carrie and-
Carrie and the group and Carla, and we discussed options for replacement, and we shared this information with them, and they decided at that time to just not pursue replacement.
Okay. The barrel's out, but the art's going to stay. You're just going to make sure that it's compliant.
Yeah.
Yes, and then there is Brad's working on the Legacy Trail. Is that what it's called now?
Yeah, so the
History
Sally
Trail?
and Poncha sculpture,
Yeah.
I mean, it has not really moved forward, so that'll be there. The path will be replaced with,
The surface will be replaced with
Accessible.
concrete.
yeah.
And then we're anticipating building a pad for the future of the art
Sally and
being
Poncha.
placed there.
And then the art that was in the center and they noted the plaque was too low, that'll be relocated.
Yeah, no,
Super
I'm
easy.
not worried about the
Yeah.
little stuff. I'm just worried about what people would notice, like something taken away or something big showing up.
Yeah. So they will notice, but it'll definitely be an improvement to
Oh, yeah,
that park. And
for
then
sure.
the accessible picnic
Yeah.
table.
So Oak Circle Park, not likely to be noticed. Three Weirs Park, the bench is going to stay in the landscaping or disappear?
The bench will,
That's
bench
one
that's
bench, the
up by
wooden bench.
itself.
Yeah, the wooden bench all by itself.
Yeah, it'll stay there, but the ramp or the sidewalk, however you want to say it, the path from the back of the street up to the bridge edge is going to get rebuilt, and it will be an obvious change. It'll be a longer path to lessen the slopes, and depending on how the slopes work out, there'll be a handrail there.
Yeah, we've seen the designs before.
Yes.
Do you think it's going to be one of those two designs? Probably.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the public is on notice that they may not be happy about that. Happy about the bench staying anyway.
Yes.
Toyon Terrace Tot, not likely
No.
to be noticed.
Right.
Vandeleur, again, are you going to add an ADA parking space and the art stays, right?
The art stays, and right now there are no plans to add a ADA parking space. But I mean, we're talking about it, but it's not built into the capital improvement program. So we're trying to figure out where to put it.
Yeah, but ultimately you're going to have to keep the
Ultimately,
art.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. That's going to, sure, of course.
So, but it wouldn't be like 3 years, right, where you carved out part of the car footprint.
Make sure you turn your microphone on, Vince.
Keep doing that. We carved out of the green space footprint the parking. We wouldn't do that at Vandeleur,
No.
would we? Oh,
You're-
okay.
Yeah. So you're correct. To put an ADA stall at 3 Weirs, we were going to have to cut into the green space to make parallel space off the street to create the parking. There is parking on 2 sides of Vandeleur Park that we can use the footprint of that existing parking and modify it to be ADA compliant.
Okay, great. So Vandeleur, we just finished. Veterans, there's no impact to the bocce courts themselves, so a lot of changes, but nothing significant except a walkway to the volleyball courts. Is that something that's going to happen?
Eventually it will happen, but
Yeah.
again, it's not built into the current capital improvement
Right,
program.
but it's not, but there's nothing big that we're missing that, other than
No.
that's going to be visible.
No.
Vineyard Park, significant work to the sidewalks, but after construction, not likely to be noticed.
Correct.
Myrna, you said something about a door. Maybe I missed that.
No, I got the impression, and again, weighing through a lot of this, that there might be some adaptations to the gates so that someone who, for example, I may be mistaken.
It was just a kick plate at the bottom. There has to be
that
a
was
push
it. The word
plate.
that was it. Was a kick plate, so that somebody who might not be able to reach the latch for the gates could actually, if they were, disabled, could use this kick plate. It's probably not going to be noticed, but
Right.
but it could be helpful for some
Yes.
people. Okay, thank you.
Great. The last one is Yountville Park. The climbing structure might be out or modified, and level play surface at the next replacement, which is a couple years out now, because didn't we just do that
We
a
just
couple
did
of
it.
years ago?
Yes, last year.
I don't know. The guy he liked that level a lot.
He loved the level.
Boy.
We actually got phone calls when he was in some of the neighborhood parks. What is this person doing?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he was very interested.
So anyway, okay, but really wider sidewalks with less slopes in some areas, potential with the climbing structure, which would be a shame to lose that.
Yeah,
It's
there's
pretty
some
cool.
issues with the south bathroom at Yountville Community Park too, that with entry and size of things that would probably be a significant project at some point. So.
Do you want to elaborate on that? I might have missed that because
Yeah, so there's just accessibility issues to the sink in the women's restroom, and there's just it's an old restroom facility, and there's not a whole lot that can be done, with the exception of probably turning them into individual stalled restrooms. But I think that's obviously down the road, but that could be a significant project. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, my whole point in going through those was just to try and avoid the problems we ran into with
No,
Forrester and Three Weirs, where people come out and shake their fist at us. And
Yeah, I don't think anyone will cry if we get a new bathroom, or I don't mean cry, but be upset if we get a new bathroom at Yountville Community Park.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so thank you for persevering through that. That was, there were, I just had to count them up. There were 152 items, of which 142 were actionable.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And that's on top of what's still existing in the previous plan that has to do with the other facilities. So, but every year, I mean, they check things off and go through and adjust. So it's just an ongoing process.
Yeah, well done. Thank you for that. Any other comments before we have, okay, so we're going to move on to item 8, staff informational reports, Public Works.
Excuse me, do we have to vote on
yes,
the
you do
approval
need
Oh,
to
yes,
of this
sorry.
ADA?
Sorry, thank you, Myrna.
Good reminder. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like a motion to vote for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, no abstain. Thank you for keeping me on track. I got into the weeds there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now item 8A, Public Works Department General Update.
So the big ticket item that you heard about us talking about earlier is the Washington Street Corridor project. Obviously, the paving is done now. They went through this week and raised the utilities back to the new level. What you'll see next week is the asphalt impressions coming through to recreate all the crosswalks, and then recreate the advisory lane and the intersection, the four-way intersection at Weber and Washington. And then in early October, the striping crew will come through and do the official final striping of the whole thing. And so we expect to be done, or we've been tasked with being done before the Halloween block party up on the north end of town. The other piece of this is minor amenities in front of Ponchas and Chichio's. So we are We have purchased large planters to put an olive tree on either side of that triangular sidewalk in front of Ponch's and Chichio's, and there'll be a bike rack there and some plants there just to soften that streetscape. And then the other item of interest is we are going to do some minor improvements to formalize the intersection, or to formalize Hopper Creek where it intentionally overflows into Oak Circle. And so it's happening at such frequency now, we feel like we can create a more permanent fixture there that will cause it to be easier to flow, not easier to flow over, but it will create a purposeful space for it to flow into, as well as be much easier to clean up and make it much easier to get back to regular status. And we won't have to be taking out fence posts and putting caution tape up for weeks on end in between storms and all of that. So that project is in the capital improvement program, and we're in the design phase right now. And it's going to be essentially a spillway that is level from what the water rises and passes across the dirt and then goes down the ADA ramp and into the street. So where that dirt passage is, we're just going to put rock riprap in there and then put larger rocks like you see in the front yard here to help catch the larger debris and keep it out of the street. And so it'll be a purposeful place for the water to go and much easier to look at, as well as much easier to clean up.
Good. Any questions about that? I had one question about the Sissio Ponchas. I know you've heard from my wife Ashley about this, but your improvements are not going to impact the pedestrian way. Is that correct?
Correct.
These olive trees and that sort of.
Those will be on the asphalt part of it. You're going to see, for those that have seen it, there's a really tall curb there too. And so part of what's happening there is, if you can imagine the bollards along Bouchon, the restaurant, we're going to put something similar on top of that curb to keep people from crossing the street and falling down the tall curb. Both of those restaurants are going to go through the Washington Street Activation Program and get their outdoor seating approved, but it will maintain the pedestrian pathway parallel to the curb from the entire frontage of there. And then the other thing that's happening that I forgot to mention is we are building a formal bus stop at the corner of Washington and Madison. And so before, there used to just be a sign and maybe a bench for a little while. And so if you can imagine the other bus stops that we have along Washington, we're building one. Those are 2 bays. They have 2 sections to them. And so for that location, because it's a smaller location, we're building a 1-bay bus stop there. So it'll be the same type of construction and match the other ones up and down Washington Street. It'll just be a 1-bay and not a 2-bay. And that is scheduled to be done before the Halloween block party also.
Great. Okay. No questions. Thank you. Samantha, would you like to do our Parks and Rec
I just also wanted to say huge, amazing applause to Rosalba and John, because the paving project was flawless on schedule, and impacts were really mitigated. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. So as far as Parks and Rec, I'll keep it short. We are in the midst of week 3 of our fall programming started. We are just under 200 golden ticket members, which, as you may know, is our largest programming area. And I know some of you participate, so thank you. And things are going really well. We've been utilizing the Schmidt Hall more for programming, which is terrific. So we've hosted several things there. Just a couple things to mark your calendar for. The October 21st will be our wellness fair and our flu shot clinic. And so that's from 9 to noon on October 21st. And we partner with Providence and have about 13 other community organizations that come out with different types of wellness information. And then the county also provides flu shots and at times other immunizations, but I won't know that until it gets closer what they have available. One new class I wanted to talk about is the dog manners class. So we do have a dog manners class that'll start in October and is prudent for some of our dogs here in Yountville. And so she is looking for at least 6 to sign up to make that go. But it's really terrific to have someone interested in coming here to town, that you don't have to drive to Napa and have dog training. So you could take a look at that. And then, of course, we're just well on our way planning for all the holiday activities that are coming up. And I'll talk more about those next month. But that's all for me today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure I'm really naive and I completely missed it, but why no Yountville Days?
So the council discussed that at their goal setting ceremony and decided that we're going to move forward with trying to hold what will be the new Yountville Days in February around the town's incorporation. And that's really based on what we have received as feedback from the businesses on really the impacts of trying to do a street closure during the high season, and also what we're running up against with the heat. And so for several years, we've had 2 years where we've had to adapt because it was over 100 degrees. And so we're really moving forward with this February time period and Mardi Gras parade and trying to really establish that for the community. So, yeah. Thank you for asking.
Great. Any other questions about that? Okay, I'd like to move on to item 9, Commissioner comments and reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to report on? Seeing none, I think we're to the last item. We made it in under 2 hours, so sorry to drag you through it. So I'd like a motion for adjournment. So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do.